Oh, wow. I think this thing is on. Okay, so I'm trying to work this. So this is all new for me right now. I was doing this, and then I was doing a different version um, where you upload videos. So I'm just kind of playing around with this. So this is like a little live stream. I know it's really late. It's almost midnight. I'm kind of a night owl. Um, so I'm trying to play around with something here. This is all new, but I am going to try to see if I can get a chance to get into this article. Um, Let me see here. I am just starting this thing back up again. Okay, I think it's okay. Okay. It'll take a moment here for me to get this together. I'm like looking. Description language. Oh boy. I think they kind of like ever so often they change this around. And, oh boy. Let's see here. Okay. And then you have to relearn how to do things that you used to do, and they stopped doing it. And oh well, yeah, that's just the name of the game, I guess, right? The name of the game. It said that there were two people. Nobody has to actually chat with me this late. It's late. So I'm hoping that this I can try to see if I can. Oh my gosh. I'm looking at it. Live stream shares. Okay. I'm looking at it here. Okay, I'll just get into it right now. I will try to see, and I will play it back for myself to see if it actually ended up turning out like anything at all. All right, anyway. Okay. I am going to open up an article, and I thought this article was really impactful because it was talking about nuclear impact. And let me see here. I was holding on to this article. I had been holding on to it for quite some time. And I kind of wanted to take it all in because what I was reading was really disturbing. If not disturbing, it was very insightful on top of that. I don't know if that makes sense, but I felt like it was information that something that had happened before. Um, Maybe some of us were even born, um, maybe more than some of us, but it is an imminent threat to humanity, I believe, still. And, it's an unfortunate situation that we're in that we really don't have a whole lot of control over. And that's what makes it even scarier, because you would think that pretty much this would not be something that we have to be really worrying about. But the way the world is operating right now, it seems as though it has now reared its ugly head again. And so I don't know if you can see the title. I have it entitled as Nuclear Winter. And the reason I have it entitled that is because I have this article that basically talks about um, war that would happen between the US and Russia. And recently there has been some concern for nuclear war that could impact a whole lot of lives. As much as 63% of the population, as much as 5 billion lives. And yeah, everyone's lives are at risk when you talk about nuclear winter. Um, and when it involves power plants, or when it involves military missiles that are nuclear warheads, all of that is very, very real and very, very much a threat to humanity as it stands. So if you give me a few minutes here, I'm going to pull up this article. So, um, to start off, what is a nuclear winter? So, a nuclear winter is a severe and prolonged global climatic cooling effect that is hypothesized to occur after widespread fires following a large scale nuclear war. And if you look up nuclear winter, you would see what would happen with that. And so this is something that has been a, a great concern for humanity, for society at large. And it could wipe out 63% of the population, or 5 billion people, off the planet Earth, maybe more. So, in current news, when you look at live science, and the article was very, very recent, it talked of a nuclear winter in the article, and there's multiple articles that are surfacing. And what is raising concern is that they're talking about even people that, if you go back in some of the demonstrations in the past, and so the history of our planet is very important as to what is happening today. So it is very much important when it raises the concern of how we operate in now, in present time. So if you look at Netflix, they even have like a documentary of, this wasn't a war, but this became a battle. But it was just an accident. It was a nuclear plant, power plant, where radioactive gas was accidentally released into the atmosphere. And the people that lived amongst that power plant were forced to make decisions to evacuate. However, they had learned that the accident was a far greater than what they had been told originally. And so it talks about that, just that accident of a release of radioactive gas and how deadly that would have been. And so this right here, on the other hand, is a far, far worse situation. And so in Life Science, it says nuclear winter from the US, a US Russia conflict would wipe out 63% of the world's population. So this article came out, it was printed out by a Ben Turner. It was published just 9 days ago. Why is this coming up is the question. So if you look at what's going on right now with the Russia Ukraine issue and then some of the issues between the US and Russia right now, it's not looking that great. And so I believe this is something that is coming up because it is basically preparing people for what could be a worst case scenario. And so the war could reduce global calorie production by 90%. So people in the past have worried about, like nuclear destruction of warheads, bombs going off. Will it hit us directly? Sometimes it's not a direct impact that does does damage, of course, but it's the aftermath that can do so much damage that could last like for years, and from what I just saw, even a decade of damage. And we don't even want to talk about how much it would cost if you'd even be able to cover the cost of that damage. But the lives that would be lost, and at the same time, lives that would be impacted for years to come. And if there were any lives that were able to continue after that point. So, from where I'm looking here, more than 5 billion people, roughly 63% of the world's current population, would die of famine in the aftermath of a full scale nuclear war between the US and Russia and their allies. This is a new study that was recently revealed. And so I'm going to just go through this. According to the researchers, the conflict would create widespread fires that could eject up to 165 million tons, 150 million metric tons of soot into the Earth's atmosphere, leading to crop declines in the food exporting US and Russia that would send global calorie production plummeting by as much as 90%. So the study published August 15 in the journal Nature Food is the latest in 4 decades of landmark research that has attempted to sketch out the threat of nuclear war. So, of the world's approximately 12,705 nuclear warheads, Russia has 5,977 nuclear warheads, and the US or the United States has 5,428. So Russia has more nuclear warheads than the US, according to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute's latest report. So the country with the third most nuclear warheads is China, with 350. India and Pakistan have between them 160 to 165, respectively, nuclear warheads. And so a full scale nuclear war would produce climate change that is unprecedented in human history. So the study co author Alan Robach, a professor of climate science at Rutgers University in New Jersey, said at a news conference on Monday, August 15, in a US Russia nuclear war, more people would die from famine and in India and in Pakistan alone than in the countries actually fighting the war. And so the most immediate effects of any nuclear war, at least for those in a targeted city, have been popularly known since the dropping of the US atomic bomb, which was entitled Little Boy, on the Japanese city of Hiroshima, August 6, 1945. So a single bomb killed an estimated of 140,000 people within 5 months of its detonation and destroyed or severely damaged more than 60,000 of the city's approximately 90,000 buildings. Six eyewitness accounts compiled by journalist John Hersey and published in 1946. So tell of the attacks, instantaneous devastation, and its immediate aftermath. First, the light of the bomb appeared as blinding and noiseless, a flash of bright as the sun, and then a shock wave arrived, hurling bodies under toppling buildings, and in the aftermath, a clear black, clear and black shadows of the vaporized dead were seen. They were stenciled on walls and streets. And the survivors who were closely exposed to the blast emerged naked. Their skin was sloughed off by the heat of the explosion and then they were wandering through a ruined city, and they were left kind of bewildered. So studies sprung up soon as 1947, so to document the suffering following the attack, which for many would last a lifetime. Radioactive fallout, a byproduct of the nuclear fission reaction that gave Little Boy a cataclysmic power, had blanketed the area in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which was bombed 3 days later. Increased rates of cancer, cataracts, and other health conditions persisted for years in survivors who had been close to the bomb's epicenters. But it would take 4 more decades for scientists to begin to learn and discuss the most lethal and frightening outcome of even a small scale nuclear war, so called nuclear radioactive dust and smoke that would block out a significant portion of the sunlight. With temperature dropping, many of the world's crops, smothered by gloom, would die, creating a global famine and wiping out billions of people. And so, to model how the apocalyptic event would affect the planet's ability to sustain life, the research calculated the amount of soot that would be generated from 6 potential nuclear war scenarios. So, ranging from 5 scenarios based on a limited war between India and Pakistan over the Kashmir region, which would produce 5.5 million to 52 million tons, 5 million to 47 million metric tons of soot, depending on the conflict scale, to full scale global nuclear war involving the US and Russia, which would produce countless conflagrations veiling the sky with 165 million tons to 150 million metric tons of soot. So, with the soot quantities in hand, the scientists plugged the data into National Center for Atmospheric Research, which is abbreviated NCAR or NCAR, Community Earth Systems model, a forecasting tool that simulates changes to the Earth's sunlight, temperature, and precipitation. So these changes were then fed into NCAR's community land model, which gave the scientists a country by country breakdown of the dramatic reductions that a nuclear winter would bring to corn, rice, soybean, wheat, and fish harvest. So, assuming that international trade is stopped and that the remaining resources weren't hoarded, the scientists subsequently calculated how nuclear winter would reduce the food calorie production worldwide, as well as the number of people who would starve as a consequence of it. And so, researchers found that in the worst case scenario of a nuclear war between US and Russia, temperatures on Earth surface would drop as much as 29 degrees Fahrenheit. So 16 degrees Celsius and more than three times the temperature difference between now and the last ice age. And the 5 million, or 5, not million, but billion people, 5 billion people would perish in the most extreme war between India and Pakistan. Global calorie production could drop by 50%, causing 2 billion deaths. The hardest hit regions would be food importing countries like Africa and the Middle East, according to the scientists. So, Australia and New Zealand, meanwhile, would fare the best because they would avoid most of the bombs dropped crops that could grow better in cooler climate. And so these are like some scenarios of what could happen. So, how deadly is Putin's nuclear Satan 2 missile? So, these are the things that people are bringing up about nuclear weapons being put in or involved in the war. So then that was an additional article that was brought up among this article. So the important thing to know is the amount of smoke being put in the atmosphere, study co-author Owen B. Toon, professor of atmospheric and oceanic sciences at the Laboratory of Atmospheric and Space Physics, who worked with Carl Sagan on a 1983 paper credited with introducing the concept of nuclear winter to the public consciousness. Okay, so this basically article is giving you the scenarios of what could happen if there were a nuclear war that would happen. And the reason why these talks and articles are coming up is troubling because of what is happening now. We had the high gas prices, the food prices went up, and some of the rents and housing, a lot of poverty, people that you see like an explosion of homelessness. And so it almost feels as though something else is going to occur that is out of most of our control, but it is happening from the top up. And so, nuclear winter to the public consciousness is what they want to bring about. So, this was told out of live science. And so, the energy released from these fires, 100 to 1,000 times the energy released by weapons themselves. It doesn't rain in the stratosphere, but so when that much smoke gets up there, it will stay there for years. Okay, so it does damage to our earth, it does damage to the atmosphere, it does damage to the climate, and then the earth of course has to do the hard work of trying to correct itself. But in the process, what can happen to billions of people is starvation and all of the things that follow after, um, that you wouldn't want to even think about. But Toon Sagan, going back to the article, and their collaborators were first drawn to the topic of nuclear winter after taking note of the surprising revelation about what might have killed the dinosaurs as well. So in 1980, a separate team of scientists discovered the asteroid that had struck Mexico Yucatan Peninsula at the end of the Cretaceous period. And so this is about 66 million years ago. As in common knowledge today, the asteroid wiped out a non avian dinosaurs. And so it wasn't the energy from the collision itself that killed around 75% of the Earth's animals, including dinos. It was the cooling cloud of the dust and the debris that impacted the release. And so it's the aftermath of these events, not the actual impact of what happens when a nuclear warhead or a blast or something goes off. It's what happens after that, the aftermath, that does the greatest damage. So, using the rudimentary atmospheric models, satellite data, this guy, Toon Sagan, and their colleagues applied the insight to a nuclear conflict just the same. So they found that a small scale, even a small scale, therm- thermonuclear wars using as few as 100 to 1 megaton nuclear warhead could start enough fires to send a thick layer of jet black smoke into the atmosphere, causing land temperatures around much of the world to plummet to 5 to minus to 13 uh, F minus 15 to minus 25 Celsius, which is 13 Fahrenheit, within just 1 to 2 weeks. And so, how would this affect us? They forecast a cooling effect that would last up to 2 decades. And so, the possibility of extinction of Homo sapiens cannot be excluded, and their study concluded this, basically wiping out humanity. And so Sagan had been drawn to the questions of humanity's long term survival through his interest of Drake equation and the famous formula that enables scientists to guess the potential of a number of intelligent alien civilizations living in the Milky Way. So concerningly, the first estimate made by the inventor of the equation, our astrophysicist Frank Drake, suggested that advanced extraterrestrial civilizations occupying the galaxy could number anywhere from 20 to 50 million. So this made Sagan ponder an idea known as the Fermi Paradox. If that were the case, why hadn't we encountered them yet? So that's the thing. So he concluded that the intelligent civilizations must not last very long because they were destroying themselves with nuclear weapons. And so while the overall quantity of the world's nukes has dropped sharply since the end of the Cold War, the number of the countries that possess the weapons has increased, and the bilateral peace treaties between US and Russia discarded by Russian President Vladimir Putin and then US President Donald Trump are unlikely to be renewed during Russia's ongoing invasion of Ukraine. So this is where we are right now and how it impacts us into some way, where these are imminent threats, is basically what this article is saying, that we are our own worst enemies. So I'm putting this in there, but meanwhile could be planning to quadruple its nuclear arsenal to more than 1,000. This is China, okay? And at the end of the decade, according to an assessment by the US Department of Defense. So all of the nuclear armed states increasingly are upgrading their arsenals. And so the most are sharpening nuclear rhetoric and the role of nuclear weapons that they play in their military strategies. The Stockholm International Peace Research Institute wrote in its latest annual report, which put global annual military spending at a record high of 2.1 trillion for 2021, its seventh consecutive year of increase. And so the new research highlights the need to commit a long term disarmament strategy that will eradicate nuclear weapons from the planet. And the authors of the new study wrote this because ultimately that would be, if you were to detonate one, it could really create a ripple effect. And how that ripple effect would affect humanity would be very troublesome and very, very pretty much the end game um, to humanity. So the nuclear weapons exist, that they can be used. If they are existing, they can be used, and the world has come close to nuclear war several times. And so this is why these articles are coming out. Unfortunately, banning nuclear weapons is the only long-term solution to this thing. So, the 5-year old UN Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which bans the development, testing, production, stockpiling, and stationing, transfer, use of threat of the nuclear weapons, has been ratified by 66 nations, but none of the nine nuclear states. And so, our work makes clear that it is time for those 9 states to listen to science and the rest of the world and sign this treaty. And so, in addition, the current nuclear arms reduction treaty, called the New START, is set to expire in 2026. So, this is by Tom Colina, so director of policy at Plowshares Fund, so a San Francisco based foundation that supports initiatives to prevent the proliferation of the use of nuclear weapons, in addition to taking weapons off the alert and basically that is the talk. I just kind of was going through it. And now, if I look over at the nation, the nuclear war between US and Russia would leave 5 billion dead from hunger. This is what the study shows. And so we must prevent nuclear war from ever happening. About 75% of the world's population would die from hunger following the nuclear war, and no one has done this calculation before. And so the detonation of a nuclear weapon would cause massive fires, inject soot into the atmosphere, blocking sunlight from reaching the surface and limiting food production, leading to the deaths of billions of people. And so the study has said this. So, reduced like global cooling and likely trade restrictions after nuclear wars would be a global catastrophic or catastrophe event for food security. And this is basically why this is happening. And you're seeing these articles. This article is a lot shorter than the one I was just reading. And so there's multiple articles that are coming out in light of these issues. Trying to go back into life science. I was in life science and I was reading the article out of life science. I was trying to go back into it to see if I could get back onto it. But if I don't, basically that's what the. So, how do you feel about that? I mean, just knowing that, I know a lot of this is out of our control, but to know that that's the reason, it seems as though we're going back in a time where we have to protest against the creation of nuclear weapons. And I believe this is coming up because of what is going on right now between Russia and Ukraine, and the possibility of some of um, these issues resurfacing again, where it turns out that we would have to um, basically try to see if there was some way to eradicate the production of nuclear warheads, which that seems hard because people are like casualties that are in society living here. If you have no control over who is the ones that are producing these weapons, and if it's more for the profit and more for um, whatever their goals are in terms of trying to dominate another country. There's not too much that you can do. So just by knowing that this is a possibility is very troubling. But I'm gonna leave this. I think I'm back on the article. So I'm going to try to go all the way down on the article because I read a number of things on this article right now, and I was trying to go back into the content of it. So it was, in addition, the current nuclear arms reduction treaty. It's called the New START. It's set to expire in 2026, which that is coming up, in a number of years to come. And so when it does, what do we do? It sounds like some of these issues are raising their ugly head again, and it just seems to get worse. Um, in addition, the current nuclear reduction treaty called the New START is set to expire. So, Plowshares Fund, a San Francisco based foundation that supports initiatives to prevent the proliferation of the use of nuclear weapons, in addition to taking weapons off the alert, committing to a second use only. Both sides should work to reduce their excessive arsenals by negotiating this new treaty that will replace the New START treaty. This was said by Colina, who told this to a Life Science. So, a key test of these political barriers is the month's 10th nine, or not nine, but 10th Non-Proliferation Treaty is what it's called. The 10th Non-Proliferation Treaty Review Conference that's coming up. So delegates are concurrently gathering at the UN headquarters in New York to renew and expand pledges on non-proliferation and disarmament, basically to stop the production of nuclear warheads, because the damage and the not only costly but the long devastating damage and impact that could even wipe out humankind, the massive impact that it could create. So far, however, little progress has been made at these conferences, according to the Arms Control Association. So that's not good news. So that's the reason why these articles are coming out, because of what's going on, and some of the topics that have come out. How Russia had invaded Ukraine, and how, when you look at some of the issues that have happened here just in the US, with the voting, the racism coming up, and then January 6th, it showed just how unsafe we were. People, we've always talked about, you know, threats from outside of the US. But when you got homegrown terrorism going on right here in the country, the people from the outside are looking. So is that what you do? It's that easy to get into the Capitol building. You're showing how easy it is to basically just come in and do a significant amount of damage when you got your own people here, right here on U.S. soil, creating an uprising that, now they're paying for it, and people did die, in that. It might have not have been a lot of folks, but there were a lot of injuries and people did die. Um, at January 6th riot. So things like that, you know, it it sends a ripple effect, and then now you have people disagreeing with different issues, political issues that could create nuclear war, and that can cost billions of lives. And that is pretty much this video. So I don't know how this came out. I was trying this out, and so I was meaning to include this article and kind of go through it and see how this would come out. And I will end this live stream right here.